Picture a Tuesday morning. You're 61 years old. You've got a cup of coffee. You've got a 9 o'clock meeting on the calendar. And you've got a plan, 4 more years, hit 65, collect Medicare, lock in your Social Security at a number that actually makes sense. The mortgage is almost done. The kids are fine. You've run the math. Then, at 2 in the afternoon, HR calls you into a room you've never had a good meeting in. By 3 o'clock, you're packing a cardboard box. I've watched that moment happen more times than I can count. And what stays with me isn't the shock on someone's face when they hear the news. It's what comes after. Walking out to the parking lot in the middle of the afternoon, while everyone else is still at their desks, there's a specific kind of emptiness to that. It doesn't show up in any retirement spreadsheet. But here's what you need to understand. You are not the exception. Every video out there is arguing about whether 62 or 63 or 65 is the perfect age to retire. They're debating decimal points while hiding the only number that actually matters, 48%. Nearly half of all Americans do not get to choose when they leave the workforce. They're pushed out by a layoff, by a health problem that snuck up on them, by a parent or a spouse who suddenly needed full-time care. The average age that people say they want to retire is somewhere around 63 to 65. The average age they actually do? It's being forced on them years earlier. So, if your entire retirement plan is built around a date you may not control, you don't have a plan. You have a wish. That's what we're actually talking about today. Let's put the actual numbers on the table. A Mass Mutual survey, along with research from the Employee Benefit Research Institute, found that 48% of retirees left the workforce earlier than they planned. Not a little early. Meaningfully early, often by 3 to 5 years. And when researchers dug into why, the picture that came back was split almost evenly into thirds. About a third left because of a sudden health event, not a slow decline they could plan around, but a diagnosis or a physical limitation that showed up without warning. Another third were pushed out through layoffs, restructuring, or what HR departments politely call workforce optimization. And the remaining group? They left to become caregivers for a spouse with a serious illness, or for aging parents who could no longer manage on their own. None of these are failures of planning. They are the predictable, documented outcomes of working in a system that was not designed with workers in your age bracket in mind. This is worth sitting with for a moment. If you are 58 to 62 right now, and your company just handed you a severance agreement, or your body is telling you it cannot sustain the pace anymore, that is not evidence that you planned poorly. That is the labor market behaving exactly the way it has been documented to behave. Midlife workers are expensive. They carry institutional knowledge, but they also carry salary history, health costs, and the political complexity that comes with seniority. When a company needs to cut, that math gets made very quickly. Here is what makes this dangerous, though, because most of us believe, genuinely believe, that we will be in the half that gets to choose. We build our entire financial architecture around age 65 as the foundation. The 401k contributions are timed to it. The Social Security strategy is built around it. The health care coverage assumes it. And then the age bomb goes off at 60 or 61, and the whole structure is suddenly load-bearing on a floor that isn't there. So what actually happens when you get pushed out 4 years before you planned? The income stops immediately. The bills do not. And the two financial pillars you were counting on, Medicare and full Social Security, are both still years away from being available to you. You are standing in a gap with no bridge. That gap is what we have to talk about next. So let's actually run the numbers on what 4 years early costs you. Not in theory, in real dollar terms. you're 61. You just lost your job. And the two financial systems you were counting on, Social Security and Medicare, both have a hard wall you cannot cross yet. Medicare doesn't activate until 65. Full Social Security benefits, for most people born after 1960, don't kick in until 67. You're not just early, you're early twice. Start with healthcare because this is the one that blindsides people first. When your job disappears, your employer-sponsored health insurance disappears with it, usually within 30 days. You have the option to keep it through COBRA, which lets you stay on your old plan. But now you're paying the full premium yourself, including the portion your employer was covering. For a single person in their early 60s, that bill typically runs $800 to $1,500 a month. That's $9,600 to $18,000 a year, just to maintain the coverage you had last Tuesday at no visible cost to you. And that's before you use it for anything. This is what I mean when I say the gap isn't just an inconvenience. It is a structural cash drain that starts on day one and doesn't stop until Medicare turns on 4 years later. Now layer on the Social Security trap. Your full retirement age is most likely 67. But when the income stops and the bills keep coming, the pressure to claim Social Security early becomes enormous. The SSA data is clear on this. If you claim at 62, your monthly benefit is permanently reduced by up to 30% compared to what you'd receive at 67. Not temporarily. Permanently. Every single month for the rest of your life. Run that math quickly. Say your projected benefit at 67 is $2,200 a month. Claim at 62, and that number drops to around $1,540. Over a 20-year retirement, that difference compounds to somewhere in the range of $158,000 in lifetime income gone because you panicked in year one. That's not a rounding error. That's a second retirement account. And there's a third pressure point that doesn't get talked about enough. If you're not careful about how you pull money to cover living expenses in that 4-year gap, you may end up triggering early withdrawal penalties from your 401k. Pull from the wrong account at the wrong time, and the IRS takes 10% off the top. Plus you owe ordinary income tax on the full amount. A $50,000 withdrawal can cost you $15,000 to $18,000 before you spend a dollar of it. I've seen people make all three of these mistakes at once: claim Social Security early, pay full COBRA, and raid the 401k because they didn't have a bridge. Each decision felt reasonable in isolation. Together, they permanently reset their financial floor downward for the next 25 years. The people who come through that gap without lasting damage are not the ones with bigger account balances. They're the ones who had a plan for the gap before the gap arrived. That plan exists. And the tools to build it are more accessible right now than most people realize. But first, we need to talk about why so many people in your position still don't have one, even when they've been saving responsibly for decades. Because the obstacle isn't laziness. It's a specific set of financial beliefs that feel like wisdom but quietly work against you. Here's the part nobody talks about in retirement planning content. A meaningful number of people in their late 50s and early 60s are actually closer to financial independence than they think. They've saved consistently. They've paid down debt. They've done the right things for 30 years. But they can't stop. Not because they need to keep working, because they're afraid to stop. There's a name for the pattern. Financial planners call it OMI, one more year syndrome. The math says you're fine, but the anxiety says you need one more year of contributions, one more year of buffer, one more year before you can feel safe enough to walk away. and then that year ends and the same voice is still there. I've watched people run this loop from 58 to 63 without ever feeling ready. By the time they finally do stop, voluntarily or not, they've traded 5 years of their healthiest retirement time for a slightly larger account balance that inflation is quietly eroding anyway. That is the real cost. Not a number on a spreadsheet. 5 years of mornings you didn't own. And there's a second belief underneath OMI that I want to name directly because I held it myself for a long time and I was wrong about it. The belief is this: you must pay off your mortgage completely before you retire. No exceptions. I understand where it comes from. Owning your home free and clear feels like the ultimate security. No payment, no exposure. And for a lot of people in a lot of situations, it's the right call. But if you refinanced your home in 2020 or 2021 and you're sitting on a fixed rate around 3%, aggressively draining your liquid savings to eliminate that debt right now is a math error. You are paying off a 3% loan with cash that could be sitting in a money market fund earning 4% to 5%, or staying invested in assets with long-term returns that have historically run much higher. More importantly, you are converting flexible liquid assets into home equity, which you cannot spend in an emergency without taking out a loan or selling the house. Cash flow is the thing that keeps your options open when something goes wrong. A paid-off house with an empty savings account is not security. It's illiquidity dressed up as peace of mind. So you end up with two forces working against you simultaneously. OMI keeps you chained to a job longer than necessary. The mortgage payoff obsession drains the cash buffer that would actually protect you if that job disappeared tomorrow. And underneath both of them is the same root fear, that what you have is not enough, that the floor could give way. Here's the reframe that actually helps. The question is not, do I have enough to retire at 65? The question is, do I have enough to survive being pushed out at 61? Those are different numbers, different timelines, and different planning decisions. The first question makes you optimize for a date. The second makes you build a system. There's also something worth saying about the currency we don't talk about enough. You cannot buy back the physical ease of being 60 when you are 70. The knees, the energy, the way your body recovers, that depreciates on its own schedule, independent of your account balance. An extra $500,000 at 72 does not compensate for the years you spent too tired and too stressed to use what you already had. That trade-off is worth making explicit before we build the plan, because that's exactly what comes next. Let me tell you about a situation I've thought about a lot. A 60-year-old engineer, good salary, solid 401k, owns his home. Then his company announces that his entire division is being restructured. The work is moving to a combination of AI tools and an offshore team. He has maybe 6 months before his role disappears. He could panic, update the resume, scramble for a lateral move, buy himself another year or two of runway. Or he could look at what's actually in front of him and ask a different question. What if this is the door, not the wall? That shift in framing is what the bailout plan is built on, not optimism, not denial. A specific set of tools that turn an involuntary exit into a managed transition, if you set them up before you need them. I'll be honest about something. Looking at colleagues who spent decades building expertise and institutional standing, then watched it evaporate overnight when a budget decision got made 3 levels above them, that has never left me. You cannot afford to outsource your financial freedom to the goodwill of an organization. The plan has to exist independent of the job. Here are the 3 weapons in the bailout plan. Weapon 1 is the SE Cure 2.0 Super Catch-Up Contribution. This one is time-sensitive and most people in their early 60s have no idea it exists. Starting in 2025 and fully in effect right now in 2026, workers who are 60, 61, 62, or 63 years old are eligible for an enhanced catch-up contribution to their 401k. The limit is the greater of $10,000 or 150% of the standard catch-up amount, which works out to roughly $11,250 this year. That is on top of the standard $23,500 annual contribution limit. So if you are in that age window right now, your total 401k contribution ceiling for 2026 is approximately $34,750. That is a significant amount of money going into a tax-advantaged account in what may be your final earning years. If your employer offers a match, you're compounding on top of that. This window closes when you turn 64. If you are in it right now and you are not maximizing it, you are leaving one of the few remaining IRS gifts on the table. Weapon 2 is the rule of 55. This is the bridge most people don't know they have. If you separate from your employer, voluntarily or involuntarily, during or after the calendar year you turn 55, you can take distributions from that specific employer's 401k without paying the standard 10% early withdrawal penalty. Ordinary income tax still applies, but the penalty is gone. What this means in practice: if you get pushed out at 61, you have access to your 401k funds right now, penalty-free, to cover living expenses while you wait for Social Security and Medicare to come online. You don't have to claim Social Security early and lock in a 30% permanent reduction. You don't have to drain your emergency savings in the first 6 months. You have a bridge. One important detail: this only applies to the 401k at the company you just left, not to old 401k accounts you've rolled into an IRA. If you've consolidated everything into an IRA, this option is not available to you. That's worth knowing before you make any rollover decisions. Weapon 3 is ACA income management. Instead of paying $800 to $1,500 a month for COBRA, there is a significantly cheaper path if you plan for it. The Affordable Care Act Marketplace offers premium subsidies based on your modified adjusted gross income. If you can manage your taxable income carefully during the gap years, drawing from Roth accounts, using Rule of 55 distributions strategically, keeping Maggie below certain thresholds, you may qualify for substantial subsidies that bring your monthly premium down to a fraction of what COBRA would cost. This is not a loophole. It is exactly what the ACA was designed to do. But it requires planning in advance, because the income decisions you make in year 1 of your gap determine your subsidy eligibility for that entire year. Put all 3 weapons together and the picture changes. The 61-year-old who gets pushed out without a plan faces $1,200 a month in COBRA premiums, pressure to claim Social Security at a 30% permanent discount, and no clean way to access retirement funds without penalties. The 61-year-old with the bailout plan in place has penalty-free access to their 401k through the Rule of 55, a subsidized ACA plan that costs a fraction of COBRA, and Social Security still intact at full value, waiting at 67. Same age, same layoff, completely different financial outcome. The difference is not income level. It is not account balance. It is whether the plan existed before the moment arrived. And building that plan requires exactly 3 steps, which you can start on this week, while you are still employed and the options are fully open to you. So here is what you actually do. Step 1, maximize the super catch-up window while it is open. If you are 60, 61, 62, or 63 right now in 2026, Log into your HR benefits portal this week and check your current 401k contribution rate. If you are not already contributing at or near the $34,750 ceiling, the standard $23,500 plus the $11,250 super catch-up. Adjust it today. Not next quarter, this week. Every pay period you leave that window unused is a contribution you cannot go back and make. The IRS does not offer extensions on this. The window closes the year you turn 64, and it does not reopen. Step 2. Build the bridge fund. Stop directing extra cash toward the mortgage. If you are holding a fixed rate at or below 3% from a 2020 or 2021 refinance, the math does not support accelerating that payoff right now. Instead, take that same cash and build a liquid reserve, 1 to 2 years of living expenses, sitting in a high-yield savings account or a money market fund earning somewhere in the 4% to 5% range. This is your bridge. If you get pushed out at 61, this fund is what lets you avoid selling equities in a down market, avoid triggering the 401k early withdrawal penalty on the wrong accounts, and avoid claiming Social Security before you are ready. A paid-off house with no liquid cushion leaves you one bad quarter away from making a permanent decision under temporary pressure. The bridge fund is what keeps your options open. Step 3. Diversify your identity before you need to. This one does not show up on any financial planning checklist, but the data on forced early retirement is consistent on this point. The people who struggle most are not always the ones with the smallest accounts. They are often the ones whose entire sense of purpose and daily structure was concentrated in the job. When that disappears overnight, the financial stress and the identity loss hit simultaneously. That combination is harder to recover from than a one alone. You do not need a second career. You do not need a grand plan. But this weekend, reconnect with something outside of work, a skill, a community, a project, a group of people who know you as something other than your job title. Start rebuilding that part of yourself now, while the pressure is low and the choice is yours. Freedom is not just a number in an account. It is knowing that if the door closes tomorrow, you already know who you are on the other side of it. The perfect retirement age is not 63. It is not 65. The perfect retirement age is the moment you have a plan B solid enough that the date stops mattering. Because when that HR call comes, and for nearly half of us, it will come before we are ready. The people who land on their feet are not the ones who saved the most. They are the ones who built a system that could absorb the shock. The age bomb is real, but it is not a sentence. It is a planning problem. And planning problems have solutions. If this is the first time you are hearing about the Rule of 55, the SE Cure 2.0 Super Catch-Up, or ACA Income Management as tools that work together, that is worth paying attention to. Subscribe to this channel. This is the kind of retirement defense strategy we build here, every week, for people in their 50s and 60s who are done with generic advice that was never designed for their situation. And leave a comment below. Tell me, what age are you planning to retire? And what does your plan B look like right now? I read every one.